I can get everybody's attention, we're already a little bit behind time. And I will call this to order. A couple of announcements. We have some coffee and some of Danville's finest in the back in the form of Porch Bakery. Please, gentlemen, as our guests, enjoy that delicacy. Wonderful stuff. Secondly, I have made the decision, I hope it meets with the board's approval, to have the filming done of the interpreters and not us. I think that's only fair to our deaf community that wishes to participate in our government. Finally, I will make it known that this is a special call meeting. It is a discussion between the city commission, staff, and our consultants. And everything that could be said has pretty much been said, and so we will just move forward with that. Any thoughts, questions, comments, complaints? Item 1 would be a proclamation with respect to Black History Month for 2022. Is there anyone that would like to read this proclamation? If not, I'll be glad to. Whereas the month of February has been designated as Black History Month, and whereas the 2022 theme of Black History Month is Black Health and Wellness, and February has been set aside for all of us to learn about and appreciate the history and contributions of African Americans and their tremendous effect on America and its way of life. And whereas this theme acknowledges the legacy of not only African American scholars and medical practitioners in Western medicine, and whereas African Americans have embarked on self-determination, mutual aid, and social support initiatives to build hospitals, medical and nursing schools, and community clinics. And whereas clinics were established by individuals, grassroots organizations, and mutual aid societies to provide spaces for African Americans to counter the economic and health disparities and discrimination that are found at mainstream institutions. And whereas initiatives to help decrease disparities have centered several outcomes, including having more diverse practitioners and representation in all segments of the medical and health programs. Now therefore, Mayor G. Michael Parris and the City of Danville Board of Commissioners do hereby proclaim the month of February as Black History Month on this first day of February, and urge all citizens to join in recognizing the importance of Black History Month and the contributions of African Americans not only in our city, but also in our country, state, our county, state, and nation. Do I hear a motion for the proclamation?
So moved. And second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Atkins, second by Commissioner Caldwell. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Item 2 is the first reading of ordinance 1985. This is annexing territories on US 127 South. I am going to ask first and foremost for a reading of that from our city clerk, please, and then we will have a motion and a second.
Excuse me, can I say something first? My name's Luke Irvin, attorney at Stice & Harbison here on behalf of the airport board, and understand from communicating with Mr. Dexter that there usually isn't an opportunity for public comment at these special meetings, but given the public nature of this issue and that it directly affects my client, we'd like to respectfully request that we have 2 or 3 minutes for Patty Powell, who's flown in from Florida just to be at this meeting, to give a final few remarks and express a few concerns, notice issues and otherwise that the airport board has, and express some opportunities to work together moving forward.
Let me ask you, Counselor, is there anything you're going to present that hadn't already been presented numerous times before? Anything material?
I don't know what Mrs. Powell has to say, but she would respectfully request 2 or 3 minutes.
And I understand that, and Patty Powell knows I respect her and I love her to death. But we have made a decision, and I'm certainly open to reversing that decision, and that's the decision of the majority of this five-person board as to whether there's anything material that we want to hear that might be different.
There is gonna be a second reading, just.
I would be okay with letting Mrs. Powell speak, out of respect for her and her family's done.
I don't necessarily have a problem with it, I don't know. Crab egg, that all come out, but, yeah, it's fine with me, you can take 3 minutes to talk to us. Okay. Ms. Powell, is there anything you think that you're gonna tell us that we haven't heard?
I think there is a path forward.
Okay. I wouldn't mind hearing that personally, but it's up to you.
Fine, real short, 3 minutes, but still,
Mayor, I should just make you aware that if you open it for public comment, you can't do it for one person. It would be an open session for those that attend and wish to speak. So you should know that you can't limit it to one particular person out of fairness or due process for anyone else. So moving forward, if you decide to hear public comment, you will hear public comment. And you can't just limit that to who you were hearing if you do in fact have an open session. I will remind the commission and the public, this is a first reading, as Commissioner Terry pointed out. It is not effective until there's a second reading and then publication of the ordinance. The second reading of the ordinance will transpire at the next regularly scheduled meeting, which is February the 14th. That is at our regular time of 5:30, at which there will be a public session for hearing, both at the beginning of the meeting and after some business is transpired. So just a reminder, this is not a final action today. It is the first step of a two-step process. But again, if you choose to have public comment, you should open it for all and not limit it to a particular individual or subset of individuals.
So let me ask those in attendance, in addition to Mrs. Powell, does anyone else have intention of speaking today?
I don't, I just want to ask Stephen clarification. When he says open it up, does he mean open it up for the whole entire meeting or just this subject?
It would be for this particular subject.
Okay.
But I should also, remind you, I mean, this is an agenda item, but the public had no notice that there would be an opportunity to speak today too. Your agenda was published in accordance with our rules and Open Meetings Act. And there is no hear the public on it, so someone who was in fact just looking at the agenda that was published would not have known they had the opportunity to speak. And so there could have been some people who said, I would have attended if I would have known there was an opportunity to be heard. But again, I want to remind you that this is a first reading and that additional public comment would be allowed at the second reading on February the 14th.
I think that is the most equitable way to proceed forward personally. I think to open the floor up at this time would be counterproductive. But I think the protocol for the next meeting for public comment would be appropriate.
Sure, and Ms. Powell or anyone else who wished to speak for or against the issue would have equal opportunity to be heard under our normal rules at that time.
Am I good? Okay. Then we'll move on, and I'll ask the clerk to read the ordinance number 1983, please.
This is the first reading of ordinance number 1985, an ordinance of the city of Danville, Kentucky, proposing to annex the unincorporated territory lying adjacent to and contiguous with present city boundaries, being the area between US 127 South and Ghost Pike, extending to the south past Kentucky 1273 Airport Road, which property is owned by Franklin Floyd Jarvis and Martha Sue Jarvis, husband and wife, Nicholas Adams and Brittany Mills, husband and wife, William D. Spoonamore, unmarried, William L. McCormick, and the Danville-Bull County Airport Board, consisting in the whole of 583.663 acres more or less, and being more accurately described below.
We have a ordinance, do I hear a motion for the first reading of ordinance number 1985? I'll go ahead and make the motion just to get the floor started. I'll make a motion that we approve for first reading of ordinance number 1985. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Atkins, we are in discussion.
Mayor, could I say something real
Certainly
quickly?
can, sir.
It's not necessarily pertaining, well, it does pertain to it, but it's on fringe. It's been very emotional on a lot of fronts. And I think that it's one of those situations where nobody's wrong, so whatever you decide to do is based on your own thought process and your own decisions, and that, that make you right, wrong, or otherwise. I hate the term no-brainer. I've heard people talk about that this time. It's a no-brainer to do it or not. And I kind of take offense to that because it's like if I don't agree with you, I don't have any brain. So, which is good. But anyway, I just want to get us all on the same page. That we're not fighting each other. We're trying to make the best decision each one of us can make based on the knowledge we have.
Well, and if I may follow up on that unless somebody else wants to speak. To me, we always seek a win-win. And I've got a series of points that I would like to take this opportunity to address. And in the spirit of a win-win, I asked the question last meeting, I'll ask it again. From the airport board standpoint of view, what is the downside? We've already said very plainly, we have no interest in the management of the airport. We legally have no avenue for management of the airport. We seek, as I understand it, we seek what they seek, and that is a larger presence in the aviation community. We seek economic development. I've made no secret over the last 7 years that economic development is critical going forward. To me, this is a win-win. And so as we look, to me, there's tax advantages here. As we as a city can have access to municipal aid funds for the benefit of the airport. That is a source of funding that is available to municipalities and not available to county governments. It's not saying anything bad about county governments, please do not misinterpret that. That's just saying that cities have access to funds that counties don't. We want to bring that to bear. We are trying our best to bend over backwards for the airport board and its customers. In this process, frankly speaking, the airport board doesn't, in the annexation process, does not have a vote. But instead of ignoring the airport board, we have engaged as much as we possibly can. We have created an incentive for the airplane owners, which would be less costly than what they have presently. We created an incentive to the employees, which would negate them having to pay payroll tax. And so when you add up that we're not intending to interfere with the airport board operations, we're trying to help the employees, we're trying to help the airplane owners who are the ultimate customers. I keep going back to what is the negative for the airport board, especially when we have no legal authority to be engaged in that. The issue has come up about communication, and all of all of us here are friends with everybody on the airport board. It's unfortunate that, there was involvement of the attorney, which brings involvement of our attorney into the equation. And yes, I know that, their attorney has kindly granted permission for us to talk. But our attorney has advised us, even with that permission, it is not wise for us to engage in that conversation. And we have always appreciated and respected Councilor Dexter's counsel, and don't see any reason why we would deviate from that this time. Continuing forward, yes, sir?
I want to bring to the discussion, I really don't want to discuss all the water that's gone over the bridge.
Right.
What I want to do is that my decision this morning is that as I look at this proposal, is it what's best for our community? And I say, a special word is it, and that is the entire proposal, not one aspect of the proposal. And that's how I'm going to cast my vote this morning, is that this appears, this is, in my opinion, from the data that I've collected, this is what's best for our community. And going forward, regardless of what has happened yesterday, last week, early this morning, doesn't really matter to me, is that once this vote is cast, I am saying that to move forward, we gotta move forward collaboratively. That process, this, that, and that's often criticized, but I'm past all that. My vote this morning is a vote to say that I think from the data is what's best for the community, and I am extending an olive branch to anybody who wants to work with us to do just that after the vote is taken, regardless of how the vote goes. So let's move forward, and let's decide this is what's best for our community, and be positive about it.
Totally agree with that, and that's why I want to provide some context as to, we try to be as positive as possible, try to be as conciliatory as possible. But you do raise the other point to this, and that is, there's a bigger picture here. It has been critically identified that we do not have the available land for housing development. And housing has been identified as a critical shortage in this community. We talk about to bring in industry, we talk about the number of jobs left unfilled. If we can't house them, how are we gonna bring in industry? And so when you're talking about, additional 300 to 500 acres for housing, et cetera, I think that's part of the bigger picture. Any other comments?
I'll just share some positives and negatives I found. I personally found the process, difficult. My impression was when we voted for intent, the talks would begin. But I felt like when that vote was cast, I guess due to lawyers, that's when the talks ended. They didn't begin like I would want to, in a more open and collaborative forum. So, what didn't happen, we can't do anything about that now. But here's some positives. I kind of went out of town for weeks and talked to these folks as much as possible, just because I wanted a fresh perspective without bias. So here's some of the positives I found also. A lot of airport managers in the city said, why would you not want to be in the city limits? We really appreciate very fast professional fire service, police, those benefits, and then also all the land. We're not just talking about the airport today. We're talking about all the properties. Talking to entrepreneurs, we just really do have a good opportunity between Norfolk, Southern, and the regional airport for economic development in a lot of ways. Those kind of big thinkers, they create progress, they create jobs. So having that positive perspective from big thinkers meant a lot to me. Some of the negatives, I did not run across one airport in the list that was our size. They all said it was always consensual. One city, it would happen in little segments, and as one group asked to be annexed and got annexed, the other group said, wow, I want those city benefits. And then the next group would ask the next group. That's usually how it happens, so I didn't run across any examples of non-consensual. So I guess my issues were how it happened. It is non-consensual, and as soon as we decided to do intent, to me, the talking stopped. So that's all I have to say, positives and negatives.
Anyone else?
Well, I would like to call for a question then.
Question's been called by Commissioner Atkins. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Roll call, sorry, go back.
Commissioner Terry,
Yes.
Commissioner Cottle,
No.
Mayor Paris,
Yes.
Commissioner Holland,
A week, no.
Commissioner Atkins.
Yes.
Item 3 is a park improvement design update. Earl, you want to start in on this, or you want to just let them go?
No, sir. We'll give them the floor. We've got nothing to add. These are the experts.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Everybody comfortable if I take the mask off?
Listen here, you know.
Do what?
Thank you, go.
I'm very comfortable. Thank you. So, my name is John Cody, Director of Landscape Architecture with Bear Becker, and have been collaborating, hopefully everyone can hear me, collaborating with Josh and Earl on this great exciting opportunity. So it's been a while since we've been together, and so today is intended to be an update for the progress that we've made. And we really envision this to be a question and answer session. So the way it will be structured, we'll give sort of the overarching goals and objectives that we've been operating under. And then we're going to dig into 4 specific sites that were identified as potential projects, really diving a little bit deeper into our thought process, some of the benefits that we see, and then, like I said, opening the floor to you for questions. With that in mind, I do have with me our design team. Chris Manning with Human Nature is leading our park design. Jim Guthrie with Hubbard Weber is our architectural lead, and Robert Loneman is leading our efforts for building systems, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing engineering. So the overarching goals and objectives. We really want to build upon the 2018 Parks Master Plan. We've got a good foundation, but the question is, what do we do with that information? We need to meet the current needs and opportunities that exist within the community itself. And we need to make sure that we engage community partners and stakeholders, because ultimately they're the ones who are going to benefit and use whatever it is that we decide to do moving forward. We need it to be inclusive. So we need to make sure that we're reaching out to the community, making sure that the input from those who are going to experience and benefit from these assets are heard, and wrap that into whatever it is that we decide to do going forward. And we need to think about an equitable distribution of services and investments in the community so that it's not focused in one area, but it's distributed across the community so that everyone benefits from what it is that we're going to do. And we need to celebrate our unique history, the unique history of our community where many of us have grown up and continue to live and thrive. Out of that, we really identified 4 primary projects. And that was something that, again, we worked with Josh and Earl with. So Jenny Rogers, where we sit today, what a tremendous success. So what are the opportunities and potentials that this facility presents to our community? It's not something that comes along very often. So how do we make sure that we leverage it to the greatest extent possible? the Wellness Center, and Aquatics. So we need to think about how we capitalize on symbiotic relationships, mutual benefit, not be redundant in what we offer. Are there key partners that can help us efficiently move forward in a way that is fiscally responsible, still addresses the needs of the community? Michael Smith Park, one of those parks that I remember being very active and vibrant when I was growing up, but if you go there now, it doesn't have that. It's lacking life. So how do we breathe life back into a neighborhood asset? How do we give pride back to an establishment that has such a rich history through time? And then there's the fairgrounds and what we're calling the Millennium District, right? We have access now to a piece of property that can help us expand the offerings that we have at really the flagship park, Millennium Park, but it's nestled in to a lot of civic assets, Boyle County High School, at Millennium Park itself, and now we have the fairgrounds. So can this become a civic district that works together and complements and enhances some of those opportunities? So the way this will be set up, Chris and I will be your primary presenters. We're going to go through each of these projects one by one. We'll dive into it, open the floor up because it's a lot of information to digest, so I think it would be better than going through holistically and then coming back and trying to remember, oh yeah, what was that question that I had? So are there any questions about how we are going to proceed here? If not, I'm going to let Chris step in and start to lead us through Jenny Rogers.
John?
I do have a question.
Yes.
Are we gonna look at any upgrades at Jackson at all?
Not as part of this study, but
Okay,
the intention would be that this is sort of the pilot program
okay,
that gets rolled out to the other parks, other neighborhoods within the city.
okay, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Excited to go over Jenny Rogers, where we are today. It's such an exciting acquisition from the city and a lot of ideas about what it could be in the future, and this is part of what it could be. It's a place where the community comes together, right, and does interesting things. But this is an existing aerial and some photographs of the existing site, and the idea is for this to become a community center. And what that means, it probably evolves over time. It has the opportunity to hold a lot of different activities. And so what are those activities and how do they meet the needs of the community? It's about a 5-acre site. And so the site is really as important as the building. It has a lot of opportunities as well. And being a good neighbor. So these are some of the specific objectives that we put together related to this particular project. And we've had the opportunity to have a couple of different stakeholder meetings here. We held those right out in the hallway and got some initial input from people on what the different uses of the interior spaces could be, what some of the opportunities of the site could be, what some of the programming could be. We had participation from the library, the arts center, extension service, some potential daycare partners. The idea of a green market came up. Maybe a local coffee shop or food provider, and then, of course, the Parks Department will have a key presence here as well. So, again, a really diverse mosaic of people and potential partners that the city could work with over time. Enjoyed that input. Documented, again, different aspects of that, so how nature could play a role, horticulture and gardening, business support, incubator, play environments, civic engagement and meeting spaces, and then a whole wish list of miscellaneous things. So we've been sort of working with that and building upon that. There's also things with health and wellness, some age-specific opportunities to deal with a whole different age groups that we have, arts and culture, recreation and aquatics, and community and family services. So we provided a list, too, of kind of inspirational images, precedent images from other community centers that might inspire the conversation with our stakeholders, and we had them go through an exercise of picking ones that they liked. So we're just showing you some of those kind of precedent images, both for the building and for the site that we use. That's often a tool that we use to kind of inspire the dialogue. We did a site analysis, so, looking at views and circulation and vegetation, utilities, district connectivity, and kind of built all of that into our concept here, which you see. So this is related to the site program, and really looking at this as a community hub. And so we express that by reaching out right at the front door and creating this idea of a community porch. So it's a place to see and be seen and to be invited in. There'd be a drop-off and parking area to the east there for servicing that into the building. It's one of the ADA accessible entrances that we have, and so that's very important. Talking about taking advantage of the topography and then creating sort of a cornerstone entry space at the corner so that it connects with Main Street. Main Street, we're sort of the eastern anchor to Main Street as a civic asset, and that's very important. The idea of community gardens really resonated with all the stakeholder input that we've received so far. The idea of a community patio, an outdoor classroom, some play environments, and then maybe like an all-persons ball field, where the old ball field used to be, would be great. And then some additional buffer to be good neighbors, with the residences nearby. Those are some of the initial ideas that came out with the site. And then with the building, again, we've sort of provided these different uses in multiple colors to kind of reflect this idea of the mosaic of different uses. So one of the nice things about this building is it has a lot of floor space that were classrooms that could be different uses. And so we're really looking at sort of the eastern wing, if you will, having the opportunity to be the best daycare, sort of providing space. There's existing restrooms in those classrooms, which is a great asset to have for daycare. And then with that accessible entry and drop-off that we talked about on the east end. So really looking at that, if daycare is going to be one of our key program elements, which it probably is, that really tends to work well. The gym and this space are already great spaces to use, like right now. So already started playing basketball over here, which I know Evan's excited about. Already being able to have meetings like this in the cafeteria. So these are real multi-purpose use spaces that can be a lot of different things to a lot of different people over time. The libraries express some interest in using the old library across the hall. And then we have the opportunity for some arts. We're really looking at dance and multi-purpose spaces in the purple area. And then the idea of a pop-up rental retail space at this end. So parking's over here in this space. So it'd be really good proximity for a pop-up retail space here. But basically, working with the architects, what we could do is we can fit this building in a way that it could change over time. So kind of a white box approach, particularly for the retail. Some of these other partners might have really specific needs where their spaces would have to be upgraded to meet those needs. But a space like that retail could be sort of pre-finished, and then the other person could come in and kind of complete that. There will need to be some upgrades to utilities here, really taking a close look at sprinkling and things like that, HVAC systems. Is everything working the way it should for these new uses? Some new codes will come into consideration because of the change in uses and multiple partners. But you can begin to see, this is not a final version by any means, but you can begin to see how what was once a school could really start to serve a whole broad range of services to the community, and really be synergistic with what's on the site. And so we started to take that and express it into 3D just so you can get a better sense of it. Not everybody likes to read plans. It's a little easier to read something in 3D. So this is kind of existing conditions that we have out there today. And then this is what we're talking about in terms of proposed. So you can kind of see the community garden here. You can see where we're taking advantage of the topography, the idea of the front porch, this arrival space where people could hang out. Maybe you could grab a cup of coffee inside and come out onto the front porch. you can see the arrival drop-off area, number A, that would service the daycare. The K would be the daycare play area behind, so there's direct access to the indoors there. The all-persons field would be up in the corner, outdoor classroom and patio and back. So again, that patio would be something that would be multi-purpose. So if there's an event going on in here and you need a companion space outside, you have that patio to use. And then there's the arts and play area, J, that would coincide with whatever dance or arts and culture things are going on in the building adjacent to that. So again, this kind of opportunity for indoor-outdoor synergies, but also some really strong connections to the community, particularly with the front porch.
Truth,
Yes.
deep down there, I can't.
I'm sorry.
It's too bad for me to read that.
Yeah, so we're thinking that there could be a small feature down here that if you wanted to use this gathering space for a small performance, or, you know, it could be a wedding, or, you know, it could be a poetry reading, or it could be almost anything. But, you know, modest scale. Interpreted. And it also becomes a little bit of an icon that, you know, with the Main Street connection to downtown, that this sort of announces a cornerstone to the Jenny Rogers site. And it could be a lot of different things. We're showing it as a little small pavilion and a terrace. So I think that's it for Jenny Rogers. Any questions or comments? Let me go back to the 3D.
I have a comment. We've since learned that other communities have sort of a community space with equipment or needs of entrepreneurs that maybe work in their homes, that type of thing. And it's been suggested that Jenny Rogers would be a good place for that. Do you think we could put that in here somewhere?
Yeah, and actually that has a lot of potential synergies with what the library is talking about providing. But then the extension service is another partner that could dovetail into that. So absolutely. I mean, and that's exactly the kind of synergies that we're talking about. That, and it's likely that this will evolve over time. You know, there might be a little bit of trial and error, and then, you know, the people that are in here start to say, hey, why don't we do this together? You know, and again, spaces like this, there was a lot of discussion about preschool after-school programs, and how could we support neighborhoods and families and things like that in here. But yeah, the whole idea of the green market and that sort of retail fit-out space was to provide an entrepreneurial opportunity for someone who's ready, willing, and able to be a startup and try something there. You know, that could be one big space, or it could be multiple spaces for entrepreneurs. So
And artists.
And artists. Right, exactly, and that's what the back to the floor plan. So there's definitely synergies here between the arts and that pop-up retail space, just like there's synergies between the arts and the library. You know, again, from that technology and learning standpoint. And my guess is that these colors will move around and change a little bit as the partnerships evolve. But the exciting thing is that this building offers that flexibility. So I think that's the key, and trial and error is okay. Right? I mean, like I think Evan said that, you know, if we only use the gym, it's a huge win for the city, right? I mean, it's true. But you have the opportunity to do a lot more, and things like daycare are actually revenue producing, you know, which can feed back into the business plan of the center. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
I'm just floored. I mean, this is just awesome as far as building relationships with partners, and multi-uses, and being flexible. It's more than I had ever dreamed, to be honest with you. So.
The same is true for us. I mean, honestly, those first two stakeholder meetings that we had, I was really impressed by the energy and the ideas. and the diversity of the potential partners that you have. Because a lot of times, community centers are really all the responsibility of the city. You take that on, you do all the work. But in this case, you have the opportunity to really share in there with a lot of different partners. So it's a unique opportunity. I can't say that I've ever run into quite a project like this. So, yes.
So if you go back to the overview that showed the 3D model, with what you currently have planned, I love what you all designed. Is there opportunities, if, I think it's L in the corner that's the other, is there opportunity to build onto structures or add structures to the property? For example, in Cincinnati, there's a social service community center that exists that wouldn't necessarily be connected to the building, but that would house all of our social services, so that those people in need, instead of having to go to 20 different places, would literally use it as a one-stop shop.
We haven't investigated additional buildings at this time because there's so much available square footage here in this building. But I think that's a conversation that maybe we should talk about, is what other social services are needed and how might they be incorporated. Because we do have a lot of square footage here to fill first, and maybe some of those could be integrated. Are there particular ones that are maybe missing from the conversation?
Well, I was here when you all did the walk, but I think on your list, I think my post-it note showed up on there as far as utilizing like our social services that we have, which is family services, BGCAP, Salvation Army, all of those. There's actually a center in Cincinnati that does this, where they have a specified site that they use. However, then there are times when like all of the social services are there, so that those people in need, instead of literally going to making 10 different agency appointments and not having the paperwork they need, having to come back and all that. It's literally accommodating that. It also includes the GED program, it's housing, Cincinnati, and all. So it's literally not just helping them with what their needs are, but helping them do budgeting costs, helping them literally kind of get out of being social assistance.
No, that's great. I mean, a place where everybody can go to get that kind of support from multiple agencies. Again, I would just say, let's try to maximize what we have in the current building before we start to look at adding additional buildings or square footage, because we do have a lot to work with here. So there might be ways to look at that, but I think that's a really good opportunity. Yeah, that's something we can add to our list. Other thoughts or questions?
I wanted to add, one of the, this kind of speaks to that question. One of the things that keeps popping up in some of the conversations we've had lately is that we really need a strategic plan for this center. We need to create an identity for it, so that we can just, when we're given opportunities, we can use that to make a decision whether it's a good direction or bad direction for the center. It's hard for us. We're kind of making some judgment calls right now, but I think it would be good if we had a strategic plan that you all were on board with, the community was on board with, that when we were posing these questions, we could say, yes, that is what we want the center to be, or no, that's not. No, we don't think that really fits into our vision for it. Especially if we're going to have, we had the pop-up retail space and the cafe, those will probably be private, privately run entities that fill those spaces. When we're deciding, when we take RFPs to see who wants to go in there, we need to have some guidance about who we choose. So what do we want this place to feel like? And I think that's, strategic plan is part of it. That's a big process, and I think right now we're trying to get some things done quickly with the building to get it ready for the daycare is such a high priority. We're putting a daycare in here. I mean, I think that's everybody's kind of, that's like the thing that we're gonna do. So we've got to keep that moving forward, and we're playing basketball in here. We're using this space, and there's things that we need to do physically to the building to keep things moving along. But in the background, I think that's the strategic plan is a big thing that we need to start working on soon.
Yeah, we facilitated a conversation with another client who runs a multi-purpose facility, a little different than this, but related. And that was their suggestion too, is get a strategic plan. And they were kind enough to provide theirs as inspiration. And I think we can find other precedents like that to inform that. So really good idea to have that. I think we've learned enough now that we could probably do that well.
Is Park Summer going to still be at Tony Davis right now? Okay.
So I forgot to mention Parks has a small presence right there in the right there. So they're very centrally located, probably only be 1 or 2 people, right? But, you know, having that sort of eyes on the entrance, and being available here, so some sort of representation here. Probably wouldn't be the primary Parks office, but having a Parks office here, a Parks presence.
We would probably have to have an employee here at all times. You know, our plan with the gymnasium, we would like to see that open all day long, you know, throughout the winter months, things of that nature, just to give kids an opportunity to have something to do. So that would be our plan, so we probably would have to have 1 or 2 staff members be here full-time.
Have a tie into after-school program, have an open gym or something after school.
Let me interrupt you real quick. I assume, are you wanting to receive public comment for the record on the other items on the agenda as you go through? As long as the commission, technically, I want to make sure you all acknowledge that.
I mean, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, okay.
They have questions.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Too many people here.
Yeah.
They're not that many people. It's lined up.
All right, so move on to the next, is that okay?
Yeah, awesome.
So the Wellness Center Aquatics.
All right, should we wait until our other 2 members get back, or should we continue to push on? I'm fine either way.
I don't know where they want to check out. Will you check?
Well, Kathy went to check on the mayor.
Oh, well, I'm not gonna check on this.
We're just a little concerned about.
If it helps, I saw him in the gym, so I think Kevin went the wrong way.
He didn't take his phone, so that's why.
Let me go do that. I'll go.
Take it 5 minutes.
Yeah, just give us a few minutes to.
That's what I thought too.
Lots of kids, and there's a lot can be done with it. I mean, really on this end of the county, I'm sorry, the city, sorry, my county hat on. This side of the city, you know, it could be very helpful, especially if you're gonna do some after-school stuff, where kids come in. We all know that a lot of times, school is the best meal a lot of kids are gonna get. And so offering an additional option for maybe churches or whatever to kind of come in, even on weekends or whatever, to do something. So I hate to turn it over just to a private entity and lose the community aspect of it.
Yeah, I think the private entity that Josh was talking about would be the cafe up towards the front, where you might be able to get a cup of coffee or, you know.
Coffee sounds like a bad idea.
Something like that. But this space is intended probably to be a real multi-purpose space, and food, yes, could be part of that. So I mean, we have a great kitchen back there and a great refrigerator, freezer situation back there, and there is some interest in maybe having a commercial kitchen or, you know, the ability to do cooking classes and.
Yeah.
So, yes, there's gonna be a food component to the use of this space. And I know the Extension Service was one of the people that was very interested in doing some of that here. But I think there's a lot of potential with that food service.
I took a peek last night when I was here for my daughter's cheerleading. And there is, I mean, there is a lot of essentials back there.
Yeah, that's one of the things when we talk to people in other communities, that commercial kitchen, a publicly available commercial kitchen's priceless. I mean, that is not a thing many communities have.
No.
We don't have one in Boyle County that's publicly available, so we're trying to keep, we're intentionally right now trying to keep that in, as part of kind of available space for the public.
When I had my food truck, that was the biggest problem in Lexington, was there was nowhere for me to go for a commercial kitchen. So kind of had to build your own.
I think
it will need some upgrades,
Yeah.
you know, to meet codes and whatnot.
Yep.
But definitely a great asset. And this space could work with it or without it. So there's things that could go both ways.
Thank you.
All right. This is on there? All right. So just like the Jenny Rogers project, there's a couple of things that really are going to be acting upon the Aquatics Center, right? We know that that's a desire of the community to have an aquatics facility that is state of the art, and we also know that Bunny Davis is kind of on the high end or the end of its life cycle. That there are a lot of challenges with continuing maintenance, et cetera. So one of the thoughts was, is there an opportunity to engage with a key stakeholder and a potential partner to amplify services for both entities, both for the city and in this case, the Wellness Center. And so we set out goals and objectives about what that means. And so just like Jenny Rogers, we've got an aerial that shows kind of the existing facility that we have to our advantage, and then some key snapshots of both Bunny Davis and what we have at the Wellness Center right now. And I'm sure that most of you know that there was a master plan for the Wellness Center to expand that has not happened. So we know that we've got available land available to us that could be leveraged in a symbiotic way. So as we start to think about what an expansion of the Wellness Center might look like, we think about different activities. So what does recreation look like? What does aquatics mean? And what are some of those things that have to be in place in order for this to be successful? So one of the things that Evan has discussed is we need to have a competitive pool, right? We need to have lanes for a team because we have one currently, so we need to make sure that we have that facility available. And we think about some of those precedent projects that maybe inform us moving forward so that we begin to zero in on what those amenities might be. So there were two precedent projects that came to mind for us. One is Ziegler Park, which is a new urban park in Cincinnati. Chris and his team were involved in that, and so it had zero entry for the pool. It had lap lanes, a climbing wall, and other amenities that we really felt like hit sort of that cutting edge thinking that we want to have for an aquatics facility. And then Sutcliffe, you know, it has probably been in place for a while, but before, when I was at Center, it was not there. But what a great facility, right? So you've got indoor basketball courts that can be retrofitted for a multitude of things. So there's a lot of flexibility in how to use that space. And you've got the elevated track, along with expanded space for equipment, fitness equipment, et cetera. So as we began to think about what this merger, this collaboration might look like, we began thinking about expanding the Wellness Center back behind the existing structure. So there's an opportunity for basketball courts, indoor basketball courts, something that I know Evan is desperately needed. That's the reason that Jenny Rogers is such a high priority. But we can also think about flexibility. Is there an opportunity for indoor pickleball? Can we set up volleyball? There are a lot of different ways that you can utilize that space, and it can be 2 or 3 basketball courts. So it offers a lot of flexibility in space. And then we're also thinking about that elevated track, right, that can serve folks who are there and just need to get a walk in. We're also thinking about the aquatics facility and where we can position it on the site. So the last thing we want to do is encroach upon our neighbors to the west. So by putting it on the south side of the facility itself, it takes it away from our neighbors to the greatest extent possible. And we have a multi-use field to the west that acts as a buffer, right? They have that field in space now, so let's maintain that and enhance that buffer to be good neighbors. And between the aquatics facility and the new building, we can have things like party rooms that can be rented out, locker rooms, restrooms that can be accessed on both sides. The idea being that depending on how the relationship works with the wellness center, we can separate those uses as needed in terms of management. So what we want to think about ultimately is what that partnership looks like and how we can monitor it and take care of those logistics. So that is a work in progress, certainly. We need to think about things like pedestrian circulation. So you've got a walking path out there now, but what a great opportunity to connect back into the neighborhood. And there is an opportunity up in the top left to connect back and to provide that conduit so that you have that connectivity, which is one of the things that we talked about as being quite important. And then we have the ability to connect out to the sidewalk network. We also need to think about service and fire protection. So the idea would be to have a drivable path that goes to the north around to service mechanical stuff in blue, but then connects back into the parking lot here. So we need to make sure that we're thinking about all aspects of how this site might be set up. And then, of course, there's the question of parking, right? More program drives more parking. There's an opportunity to enhance the parking lot that we have currently south of the building. One of the things we ought to think about is how we can share the parking that's available to us directly to the south. And that's another opportunity, another conversation about leveraging it. Instead of building a sea of asphalt again, why not leverage what we have available to us?
And these are conversations that you've had with the hospital, the wellness center, or, yes?
Yes, and so the Parks and Rec Master Plan indicated the need to pursue partners, and this is partnership at a high level. It has an opportunity to take advantage of each strengths of each organization. So if you've been to the Wellness Center, that you have to acknowledge how successful they are at programming space that they have. Evans and we believe our expertise is being mobile, field programming, space programming throughout town. We think then this opportunity would free us up to move about town better while maintaining but actually improving the service that is provided out of Bunny Davis Center. We believe with the hospital at play, we think this is a good outward display of the hospital to be a partner with the city, and it creates a symbiotic relationship between two of your largest entities that have the same mission ultimately, which is quality of life and wellness for the community. So it to me, presents itself as a terrific opportunity, and it takes advantage of existing infrastructure, which saves the community money. For example, the parking lots, in and of themselves, at a facility, an aquatic facility like that, you're going to end up building more parking lot than you are building if you're not careful. And so this strategically prevents us from having unnecessary expenses, which is what he talked about there for a second. And again, it's an opportunity that we should continue to investigate. They provided a terrific layout for the property that it seems to tick a lot of boxes that were identified in the master plan. So it's absolutely something the community should have a conversation about. Yeah.
Is this mostly focusing on indoor facilities?
That facility then would be focused on internal space programming of the building, and also the aquatic center.
Well, there would be an outdoor.
Yeah. So now the pool, the thing that we like as staff, as Josh and I look at this pool and identify what they proposed in greater detail, it is a swimming facility that is extremely accommodating. It is finite. It doesn't get carried away with bells and whistles. It accomplishes the overall objective, which is to provide outdoor seasonal, I can't even say that word, seasonal, my good night. I'll say that again too. Opportunities for outdoor space. It does that. It's got zero depth entry. It's got lap lanes. It's got a play area with a climbing wall. It's got outdoor sun space. It really, economically and through partnership, accomplishes a lot.
Yeah, I love partnership. I think it's great.
Y'all have addressed this, I'm sure, what about, aquatic indoors? There's a lot of practice that goes on every winter.
So they do have that indoor pool there, and this enables them to reinvest in that facility. It, which, you know, it's necessary from time to time. And so it revitalizes and reinvigorates their focus on that facility. But also, we would suggest that Center College's natatorium that they're under construction with is also an opportunity for indoor sports, which we should think about, indoor swimming activities, which we should think about that. We should, how do we partner with Center over time to push swim teams into that facility and make that more of a competitive footprint, maybe. So there's a lot, this is hospitals do partner with cities and programming in other places. This is bringing an idea that is not being exploited here yet to our community. We're looking at it. And to me, it's just a terrific opportunity to do things that otherwise it's very difficult for individual partners. It's truly in a collaborative way. It checks a lot of needs in the community. It puts resources west of the bypass that is walkable for the folks west of the bypass. So then you're going to end up with a facility on the east end here, potentially. You end up with something on the west side of the bypass that's walkable. You're improving Michael Smith Park potentially, so that's more walkable and more accessible. And then a continued investment in Millennium Park area. It diversifies your footprint a little bit. And so to me, it's a win. No reason not to talk about it.
I agree.
And, you know, you can always say no, but it's 100% worth investigating.
Seems like that'd be the most efficient way and least expensive way to get where we want to go with some of this stuff.
Well, and to the hospital's advantage, you know, when they look at the footprint of properties they have in that area, it could be said, I would suggest that the Bunny Davis Center might be a valuable asset for them down the road. I don't know that, but, you know, that's something that you would want to think about, and what way the hospital could take advantage of that facility, given that they have so many other satellite facilities immediately adjoining it, or immediately in the area of it.
You know, classroom teacher keeps raising his hand. Would you walk us through the layout?
Sure. Parking lot, essentially the same. This is representative of the Wellness Center as we have it. Expanding our parking and a potential drop-off that would feed back towards the aquatic facility. One of the ideas was to have a secondary entrance, something that we need to think about. And we need to think about that logistically too, how we monitor and control that. There would be a connection to the existing facility. Can they still hear me if I step away from the mic, or should I?
Just turn it around towards it, you'll be fine. There you go.
That's Rockstar, right?
That's not even hard, was it?
As we were talking about having a circular path around this facility, so, and having a workout green, which is J, I could envision that being kind of an indoor-outdoor space with the gymnasium, depending on what that event could be. I could see garage doors that would open up and give you access to that, if that's desirable. Mechanical equipment would be kind of in the central hub. Right now, if you go out to the Wellness Center and you go out back, you see all of the mechanical equipment, so I don't think we want to get into relocating that. But it does give us the opportunity to have a service courtyard that would be shielded by this new facility, right? So now your neighbors are looking at building, not the back end of the facility itself. We do need to think about service, right? So a drive that comes back services the mechanical yard, but then can continue around the backside of the facility and tie into the driveway that's south of it. So we're gonna utilize that as opposed to building yet another road that would be parallel here. Again, this is large enough and represents indoor basketball courts, some of those flexible spaces, party rooms, certainly, restroom facilities. A restroom facility actually that can be accessed on both sides so that you don't have redundancy in those facilities. And then any of the support buildings that we would have, we would put along this property line so you're not looking at the loading docks for this property to the south. So when you're in the space, you're in the space. And we're also thinking cabana seating, or cabanas are a thing now in sort of that aquatics arena. So thinking about it, those being on the backside of the aquatics facility that help screen and break up some of that visual impact from beyond. Did that? So this diagram hopefully will help a little bit. But so we've got the aquatics facility here, basketball courts in this area with that elevated track. We've got the mechanical yard here, and then we've got those flexible space, flexible rooms that could be leased out, rented out, right? And then we've got the restroom facility here. And if this is an entryway, secondary entryway, we've got a place for, greeting, desks, that kind of thing. And then we've got the mechanicals that would be needed for the aquatics facility that could be housed on that southern property line, as we had discussed. Guard shack for lifeguards, changing rooms, and even concessions. So really trying to take that model from Bunny Davis and translate it over here so that we replace that if Bunny Davis becomes something different. So what we're looking at doing is making sure that we don't lose service with this, but really trying to be efficient in how we move forward. I think one of the things that we have in a community like ours is there are a lot of common interests, and if we can bring them together, kind of like the idea of Jenny Rogers, gosh, isn't that a win? I mean, doesn't that give us more power to move forward and get what we want? And I think it's creative thinking like that that's going to lead us to that ultimate vision, which is a really cohesive park system that is a place where people want to be.
So, maybe for Earl or Josh, we are planning on incorporating the current Bunny Davis Center into what this evolves to. I know at one time we talked about selling it to help pay for the improvements, so I didn't know where that sat.
And I think you'll see throughout all of the things we talked about today, we're taking everything that's Bunny Davis and finding a home for it somewhere else, and Bunny Davis ends up not being not being a city property. So you'll see some of the items are here. You see racquetball and the pool, and then you'll see some some stuff comes to Jenny Rogers, the dance classes, maybe some of the day camps, like after school programs. Some of that ends up here. Some of it ends up at the fairgrounds, the tennis courts, like we'll talk about later. So I think, you'll see, we tried to find, that's what's limiting Bunny Davis right now is capacity, right? It just doesn't have the size for anything that we want it to be. So I think we're taking everything there and blowing it up, and putting it somewhere else and making it better. So I think that was kind of one of the goals we had. We made sure we found a home for everything there.
If I heard Earl correctly though, maybe, big maybe, the hospital might be interested in that property. Big maybe.
Well, we need to talk about it, is the point. Yeah, we need to explore the opportunities to reuse property in our community effectively for the highest best use should be our goal. And if that means that we have to partner with the hospital on the Bunny Davis facility and partner with the hospital on the Wellness Center facility, and if that makes financial sense, then we need to consider that. I mean, that's being reasonable. Yeah.
And there are so many details if this partnership happens, there's so many details to figure out. Like, it's a little bit daunting, but I think it's something that, we just have to go to work, get the attorneys involved and figure out what that contract looks like, because that's just gonna be a big partnership.
Yeah.
I've seen in another community, their swimming pool, was at the end of its life, and they've essentially covered it and made it into a splash pad, and it's also ADA accessible. And it does happen to be in their city park, but I would like to, maybe we could consider that at Money Davis, and that would be another neighborhood park, that would be accessible to the neighborhood and walkable, and, then my question is, so all of the fitness would essentially move to, wellness center?
It should. I mean, that's a consolidation of resources. I mean, it's the same equipment. If you're gonna bench press, why are you bench pressing? Why are we investing the resources necessary to provide that bench press 2 blocks away? It just doesn't make financial sense where if the hospital's mission was to paint billboards, but that's not their mission. Their mission is to provide community wellness and support that programming. So it's a shared vision and shared resources, and so which makes sense. They're a nonprofit. They're the ideal partner, which is why you see it so successful in other places. The idea for me came from when I was living in Tennessee. You can go to 3 or 4 facilities down there around Knoxville where it's exactly that. Blunt Memorial partnered with the city of Maryville. There's opportunities there. Yeah. So then, 2, we're not just looking at these types of opportunities, okay? I want to make sure we go back to this facility here, for example. When we talk about we're looking for partners, we're looking for all opportunities, okay? And so then Rotary's does their normal spring capital campaign. And so what we've done is we've met and been introduced to Crimson Claycomb, who is with Kendall and Friends Foundation, who is opening the facility on Bergen Road. On their site plan, they talked about an all-purpose, inclusive T-ball field up there, right? So we sat down and we met with those folks, and then we realized that with Rotary's vision, we saw the facility down there in Chattanooga this fall where we saw the inclusive T-ball field constructed through a partnership with the city, YMCA, the Miracle League, which is what Kendall and Friends Foundation essentially is for us, and Rotary. So we're trying to engage in those 3 organizations, the city and Kendall and Friends Foundation and Rotary, can we do the special T-ball field in a collaborative way? So we're looking at not just high-level partnerships, we're looking at small-level partnerships too, right? There's no benefit to having 2 special needs or all-inclusive play T-ball fields when we can have one that serves everybody. That's great, right? So that's our strategy, and it goes. So what I'm pointing that out merely to say that we're looking at that opportunity from individual things to this. So Jenny Rogers, the library inside of this facility, to me is a perfect marriage, right? It brings that resource walkable for the kids that are immediately near this area and adults. So we're looking at those opportunities across the board, and this is one of them.
And I know we haven't got into some of the other parks, but will this be the primary and only aquatics facility that the city's looking to do? And I just bring that up because from where we're sitting right here, that's pretty far away for kids in this area with no real easily accessible way for them to ride a bike or anything. I know in the past when there was discussions of the aquatic center being at Millennium, at least there was bike paths and sidewalks to get you there. And so believe me, I understand the expense of an aquatic center, things like that. So if that's going to be the primary aquatic center, and this is probably where the the county gets involved as well, that we start looking to do more trails to connect that, but also, I'm hoping, especially when we start talking about Michael Smith Park, we've got an abundance of splash pads over there, or just things, I mean, the one that y'all put out in front of the water treatment facilities, a hit, I mean, it probably would be a hit right now, even though it's 30 degrees.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I'm hoping that those are happening more frequently out throughout the area, and I would love to see a splash pad actually on the property here too, but, that is definitely an area over there where, you've got a little more, affluent people that probably could afford to drive somewhere versus people that, you know, maybe on this side of town that aren't, that can't get all that way. So that's just my question is splash pads, aquatic center.
I'm not sure, you know, that, right now, this is the only aquatic facility we have played, but thinking about like how we get kids to it, I think that's something that Evan and I kind of talked about this a little bit, because they, you know, if we have day camps here, but the pool's out there, how do they utilize that pool for day camps? Evan and I have even talked about, like, at what point does Parks buy a bus? You know, those kind of things, like, yeah, how do we get kids to those facilities? You know, it's hard for a town our size to have more than one facility like that, so it's gonna be too far for some kids, so how do we get kids to that facility? I think that is, I mean, Evan and I have talked about that already, that's a, yes, it needs to be the city's facility that everybody in the city has access to and can use, so that's something that we'll definitely be thinking about as we.
Well, the,
get
you know,
further.
the county's already a partner in Parks and Rec, so, you know, we're welcome to partner with the county for anything that you all may want some input on.
And by describing aquatics facility, you're talking about this is the water with depth to it. I think you've got some other proposals to think about splash pads with the success of, so you're correct, the success of the water plant has proven that is a strategic feature that that's easily deployable in other places, and so, yeah, they're talking about that.
Let me ask a granular question to Evan. Talking about putting in a concession area. When you consider the manpower, when you consider the money, is it really something that we should be doing? I mean, I know it's a nice service to provide, but does it make economic sense to do that?
I think most definitely it does. You know, just alone at our pool at Bunny Davis, that concession stand stays pretty slammed. And you gotta look at other aspects too, is, you know, some of these kids require food at times, you know, whether they have a diabetes or something of that nature to get their blood sugar back up. I think it's most important, especially on those hot days. You know, they got to have an opportunity to be able to get drinks. You know, I think that's one thing that slips people's mind the most is you're swimming in the water, you forget to drink. You know,
Are you able to staff it appropriately, and are you able to control the flow of funds?
most definitely.
Okay, that's all we need.
I think, Jason, point about accessibility, and I guess the other thing that I want to keep in front of is also affordability for our citizens. I know you all focus on that, but we keep tossing those two words out.
And I think that one of our charges here is to not just focus on 4 specific sites, but it is all about connectivity. What is that experience getting from point A to point B? So thinking about kids that are getting from Michael Smith Park out to Millennium Park, you know, what's that best route and what's the safest route? Are there other avenues that we can look at that aren't along the street? So as we get into a little bit more in-depth study in this presentation, we're starting to look at some of those natural and logical connections that begin to weave the community together. That's not just a sidewalk, right? Because we've got a lot of natural features within the city itself that lend themselves to an experience that it goes much further than just that, right? Now, we also have to make sure our sidewalks are safe. We have to make sure they're lit. We've got to make sure that we have good pedestrian vehicular interactions, those collisions, right? We need to make sure that we have safe passage. But I think there are other things that we can start to think about. Trails are one of them, right? How can we make those connections and have that be, you know, Josh likes to run a little bit, right? So how can we provide running trails that are safe and convenient and provide a variety of services for all different ages, abilities, et cetera? So, yes.
Can I call my first time out? I've got three, so I'll pick one.
You got to,
So we got a 5-minute break?
3 the whole day, not 3 each half.
I forget the rules. I'm not sure.
All right.
Go use it.
5 minutes.
Take 5?
Good.
Now you're hitting it. Now I got that. Started off good.
Speaking of that, I'm looking at
I think our microphone was off during that last session.
Oh, yeah.
I think so.
I was still getting plenty of audio off of these mics too.
Well, I project. I think.
Let's go ahead and get started.
I've got the coach's voice right now.
Yeah.
Everybody refreshed?
Yeah.
Yes.
So now we get to talk about Michael Smith Park. So again, one of our key 4 projects that we're updating today, and such a beautiful site, you know, the floodplain, Porch Run, and you know, close proximity to residential, which is exciting. And you know, the more we sort of research this area, we also found out a little more about Town Branch. And Town Branch has a lot to do with why D'Angelo's here, which is pretty cool. So this is where Town Branch actually comes down and means Porch Run. But anyway, we have the opportunity to update and transform Michael Smith into something that will serve this area of the community, to celebrate Clark's Run at the stream corridor as a unique asset, to improve connectivity to the community and the neighborhood around it, and to provide improvements that are durable, because there is potential flooding that happens down there. We consider that as we think about the improvements, and then to celebrate the history and the culture of the people in the neighborhood around it. So we had a community meeting down at the site one Sunday afternoon, and somehow the city crews were so good they ordered a 60-degree day in the middle of December, which kind of blew our mind. It wasn't a ton of people, but it was a good first conversation to have with the people that showed up. And again, we did an exercise with precedent images, asking about recreation and nature and all kinds of sorts of things, and gave people different dots that they could use to put next to the things they liked and didn't like. So we listened and we recorded those things and found out preferred images and not preferred images. And you know, mostly there was a lot of interest in passive types of activities more so than active. Sports fields and things like that. A lot of interest in history. Many stories about the old stone walls that used to be there at the intersection, and bringing back something like that. A lot of interest in a spray feature, you know, something to interact and cool off in the summer. You know, things like that were very important. The idea of shelter was another one, place where the community could come together and have events and family reunions and things like that. So we documented all those things in the preferred images. And we need to do more of this. I mean, this was just a first interaction, but it was a good first start. And that kind of inspired us to develop 3 ideas. So I'm going to share 3 different concepts. We call them the necklace, the greenway, and the farmstead. And I'll go through each one of those in more detail in just a moment. But this idea of the interactive water feature is an idea that we've developed that could apply to any of these 3 concepts. One of the challenges of this site, because it floods, just like the pool that was there that didn't work because it flooded, so we had to fill it in. We don't want to create a lot of mechanical facilities in the ground that are spraying up, because those will get inundated with the silt and all the problems that come with flooding. And so we're trying to come up with a creative way. How can we do an interactive spray environment down there that isn't subject to problems with flooding? So we said, what if we pick up the plumbing and have it come down on you? And so the idea here is to create this sort of skeletal structure. It feels like an old barn or an old historic structure that might have been there back in the day. But then we create the plumbing so that it drops the water on you. So you have a water window and a water door and a water wall and a water ceiling. So it becomes this really interactive this cool activated, interactive environment where you push a button and it activates something, or it's motion sensor activated. But there also could be a water runnel that kind of celebrates the story of Clark's Run and the creek. So everything kind of drains into that and then gets recirculated. So that's an idea that we just started to play with and put out there as a creative way to maybe harken back to history, but also do something that is not subject to the problems of flooding. So just keep that in mind as we go through these 3 different ideas. So this one's called the necklace, and we call it that because it's a series of kind of spaces that get bigger and bigger as you go from the intersection over towards the landfill area and Town Branch. This one shows, and they all show, some improvements to the intersection there with, again, improving crosswalks, improving safety, a place for pickup. There's bus pickup out there at that intersection, actually a safe place to have that happen. Some improvements to some stone walls that would come back, and then the interactive water feature, and then a major central gathering space, which would be this one. In this case, there's a shelter that sits on the edge of that gathering space, and the shelter faces both directions. It faces towards the green, but it also faces towards the creek. And so depending on what your activities are, you get to celebrate the creek, or you get to have this sort of community living room, again, where activities can take place like family reunions or parties or whatever. And then as you move towards the Town Branch, we have the opportunity for some court sports, and then for some larger and larger trail loops. And in this case, we're looking at, in all 3 concepts, we're trying to find creative ways maybe to take advantage of the landfill space. I mean, the landfill comes with limitations. We can't do a lot of things on there. But what can we do? So this particular concept shows some earthworks and some climbing walls and climbing materials, some bouldering features that would be here and here. And so it sort of spirals up to those, so it gives you a high point where you can get up and see Clark's Run, you can get up and see Town Branch, and so they become these little beacons that you climb up to. And again, that's great exercise, kind of spirals up. So most of the rest of the site is flat, but we thought maybe providing some vertical features there to climb up on might be a really unique and interesting feature. And then we've also looked at an opportunity to have a new crossing point, so a new bridge right down here where the Town Branch comes in, and this would provide access over to this green space, which is adjacent to your cemetery. And so it provides, again, connectivity from this part of the neighborhood over, but also starts to link Michael Smith with the cemetery, which is another one of your assets. I know you've had a lot of discussions about dogs in the cemetery recently, and so we put out the idea here of maybe a small dog park being here in this space. Again, it's proximate, but not in the cemetery.
What's your grade right there off of the Duncan Hill?
Yeah, this area is pretty flat, but then it slopes down.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're showing in the open lawn area that's there now, which would work great for a dog park. I mean, it wouldn't be a really large dog park, but it's one idea that we're putting out there. But I think the idea of connecting across, taking advantage of this asset, and then also the cemetery, again, it starts to weave everything together and improve access from both directions. Similarly, we're showing a path going up the Town Branch, which could connect up to Jenny Rogers, Constitution Square. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So anyway, this concept, the necklace, is this idea of these bigger and bigger spaces with different uses that sort of culminate with these 2 climbing features and the connection to Town Branch. And then the next concept.
You don't have any pictures of the climbing feature, do you? It sounds really cool. I just wondered.
I don't, and we really haven't designed it yet, but the idea is just to come up with this notion of a landform and maybe some boulders and climbing elements that you can get up on. And if that gets traction, then we'll start to design it. part of what we're gonna do today, and as we share this around with the community, is to get feedback on the strengths and weaknesses of each concept. And we'll try to weed out the weaknesses and synthesize the strength into a preliminary plan at some point. And so if people start to like that idea of a climbing feature, then we'll design that in more detail. So this concept we call the Greenway is really about sort of the language of the stream, if you will. So, streams are very sinuous and they curve. And so the idea here is we take that whole language of the stream and we build the spaces of the park around that language. Still has the same basic components in it. So an improved intersection with crosswalks, drop off, a water play feature, and then a gathering space in the middle. This time though, instead of the shelter being adjacent to the creek, it's over adjacent to the street. And so it's closer to the residences. And so in this case, there's kind of a conversation going on with the residential area in the pavilion, and it faces the whole floodplain. So you're not right up against the water, but you're up against the street. And then the pathways kind of widen until this time at the landfill area, we're looking at a large butterfly meadows. So a pollinator garden, basically. And it's a butterfly pollinator meadow, both in idea, but also in shape. And so it's a series of pathways that cut through the pollinator meadows. And we could do some ecological restoration of Town Branch and start to strengthen that connection between Town Branch and Porch. And so these become like little interpretive stops along the pathway network about the ecology and the history of Town Branch, and then that connection up towards Jenny Rogers. In this case, the bridge connects over to a different use in that space. And in this case, we're talking about maybe like a memorial garden. And so it becomes a passive place to stroll and to sit. A lot of times cemeteries have restrictions on what you can plant because there's so many plots, right? But people love donating trees and donating shrubbery and donating flowers. And so having a companion memorial garden to the cemetery is another really compatible use there, and could be a feature in its own right. A lot of different seasonal interests. So that's the Greenway concept. And then this last concept we call the farmstead, because it's kind of built using the orthogonal of the city and the north, south, east, west grid like a farmstead would have been, right? And so, again, improvements to the intersection, water play environment, major gathering space. But in this case, the gathering space is anchored by a shelter sort of in the middle, so it's surrounded by green. And in this case, we've gone and say, okay, how can we make the landfill as productive as possible? And we've actually turned it into something where you could have greenhouses, you could have solar panels, you could have something like lavender fields. And so it becomes kind of a agrarian, productive landscape. It turns it into something maximum in producing. And if we end up with a green market here, for example, in Jenny Rogers, that could play into what's produced in the greenhouses or what's produced with things like the lavender fields. Because I don't know if you've been to any lavender farms in Kentucky, but they're growing all over, and they're big tourist attractions. And people make soap, and they make essential oils, and they make candles, and there's kind of a whole industry that spins off of lavender fields, in addition to them just being beautiful and fragrant to visit. So in this case, we're trying to do some things on top of the landfill that actually give it value and purpose that could tie back into other things that are going on in the community. Similar idea of crossing here. Only in this case, it's just a passive open space with a walking loop and a connection over to the cemetery. Not any really greater purpose other than that. It's just a connection. So those are the three concepts. And then, as I said, we like to go through a process, and these are very early, very loose concepts. There's not a lot of detail to them yet on purpose. But we like to hear people's comments about the strengths and weaknesses of each, so that we can, again, kind of synthesize the strengths and weed out the weaknesses. Before I open it up for questions and comments, though, like the strengths and weaknesses, there is a big idea about connectivity, a couple of big ideas really that are starting to emerge as we work on this. And one of the ideas is what we're calling the Unity Trail Loop. And so Michael Smith Park, that we just visited, is right down here, and we talked a little bit about Town Branch, which is here. Town Branch goes all the way up, right? Actually goes beyond Constitution Square and its origins. We saw a historic map in the city building. But you have Jenny Rogers and Constitution Square. You have the Bay Middle School. You have a lot of assets along that area. And the idea of creating a loop, right, that connects all of these assets could be a really wonderful thing to work on. And you could theme each part of the corridor with different storytelling, different history. So as we know, 2nd Street has an incredible African-American history and story to tell, right? And all those great assets. You have the ecology of Porch Run as a story to tell, and you have the Town Branch as its own chapter in the story to tell. And together they form that sort of triangular loop. And that sort of idea of connectivity, connecting our assets, plays in at different scales. So we're starting to look at how that fits into a larger community-wide network, which starts to address some of the concerns about, this asset on that side of town and this asset on that side of town. How do we improve connectivity? How do we even go beyond city boundaries and start to look at how do we connect to regional green space assets? How do we start to look even beyond that and how we're connecting with other communities in the Bluegrass region? So I know that's a little bit beyond the Michael Smith conversation, but just wanted to show you that we're starting to create some tools and some ideas about connectivity as we work on even just these 4 projects. But the other projects that we add to it, like Jackson, soon to come, will need to fit into that too. So not only site improvements, but how they connect to a broader network so that everybody has equal access. So questions, comments on the Michael Smith concepts?
Didn't the jail at one time have a gardening program? Or did I just read about that somewhere?
They do. You said the jail?
They do?
You said the jail?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, they do.
so that could be into their concept C.
Yeah, having partners, again, the idea of partnerships, who would own and manage, or who would manage that sort
Because
of.
they would need to be managed.
It would be, absolutely.
And Lakewood at one time had its own community garden.
That's right.
Okay.
Really huge project, and like everything else, when you lose your volunteer, it sort of drops off.
Right.
Well, all 3 concepts to me is excellent.
Yeah, they each have potential.
Yes.
Would you all consider I've always thought that a gambling boat on the Porch Run would be good. Did y'all think about that at all?
We did not.
Yeah. That's right. You're on the water.
That was not on our storyboard initially, but.
No, I think they're all very good. And I guess, are y'all gonna take these back to the residents in the city or have it on the city?
I think, yeah, that's our intention, is to share with the community more.
Yeah, we'll definitely have another public outreach. We need to figure out the location and time for that to make sure we maximize input that we get. This was, we were planning to have these boards up at the Martin Luther King Day celebration, that ended up getting canceled, so that would have been a great time for us to get some input. But, that's our next step. We were talking about that before the meeting, is how do we get this out there and get people's input on it? Because that's definitely important here. But I'm definitely, like, the whole intersection at 2nd Street with J. Woods, how we improve that to make it welcoming, slow people down for one thing, is one of the things I have, is slowing people down through there. Bring some of that history back with, we talked a lot of time about stone walls and, how that was set up, trying to find pictures, I don't know, we can't find any pictures, my PQs can't find any pictures of those walls, so we're trying to find something there to help, to guide us. You didn't notice any parking on there, y'all are gonna learn that I don't like parking lots, and I'll keep them out of there as long as I can, that's why we're not trying not to add any parking here, but we've talked about a few ideas if we need to add parking, if we end up, but I don't, if you're not having organized programmed activity there, you don't need a lot of parking. But if you have a family reunion with 100 people, you're gonna have to park them somewhere. So we've talked a little bit about maybe if we need parking, we add some across Second, if we improve that intersection, we add parking across the street, not Visco building, or something like that that's just available, but things like that. There's so little, there's not very much usable space down there as far as, when you take out the landfills, there's not a lot of space. So I hate to take that up in parking lots. So we're gonna try to find a creative way to add parking there without using the spaces there.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Josh. I failed to mention, this concept does show some parking right here along the edge of that green. It would just be a single loaded lane of parking there, which would at least get some people off the street, because that was what we heard from the residents. People park on the road, and the road's not wide enough to accommodate two-way traffic and people parking. And so the idea of a modest parking area, whether it's across Second Street or right along that edge, probably needs to be accommodated somewhere.
If we're gonna encourage any sort of activity or use there, I think there has to be some parking.
Yes.
People won't use it if there's no parking.
Right.
What's Ms. Calhoun want?
I know, I thought, where's this Calhoun?
So she pretty much ran our December 5th meeting that we had down there. That was her meeting, so, we've definitely got a lot of input from Ms. Calhoun.
She was awesome.
As long as we put a water feature down there, she's gonna be, and some lights, she'll be happy.
One of the other things that we've not talked about is when you look at that picture, the west side of Second Street, so we were looking at improving that intersection, making Second Street feel like we're driving through a park. We had the Bee and Butterfly on the west side. That green space, although we use some of it for public works, we acknowledge, I'd love to have that spill over into that space. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a special opportunity since the city controls that property to do something with that. And the trail is already over there.
Correct.
It's nice.
In reference to your combining stuff, the county actually purchased, for lack of better words, a system for storytelling. Like, it's mainly going to be used at Constitution Square. We're thinking about putting it out for Parable. So it's basically something that you either have an app or you pull up on your phone, and you can just you have a local person that narrates it or whatever. It kind of tells you about that area. I think we've got a lot of space left to fill that up, so if you guys do something like that, I don't see where we would have a problem integrating that into that television history.
That would be great for this.
Right, because we're mainly looking to use it for Constitution Square, but I think this all kind of plays together in the history of Danville and Bull County. So, and just on a side note, on your climbing things, there's a part back where this is home, so back where I came from, where it was just they were basically widening out some streets, so they put these mounds of dirt over off to the side of the road, and people started making walking trails. It was really high, and so it was almost like a cardiovascular workout to kind of get up to the top of that hill. And so when you were talking about those climbing features, that kind of reminded me of that. So, and they actually ended up building this huge park around it now. It's kind of a big, huge, kind of almost all the things they're doing here. So
That's great. Well, and if you have pictures of things like that, we invite people to share experiences or precedents like that with us. If that inspires the conversation, feel free.
When you talk about this loop, is that an actual trail separate, like the specified walking trail separate from sidewalks and streets?
Well, I think it would take on different personalities on the different segments. So certainly along Clark's Run and Town Branch, it would be its own standalone path. On Second Street, it's probably going to be more like a an enhanced sidewalk.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it would have to be there.
So you would still know you're on that trail and you could still follow it and navigate your way back.
Right, so we'd have some special paving, some interpretive things in the paving, signage, you know, maybe the ability to scan a code and go on your phone or hear someone narrate, so it could be digital and physical. But just that storytelling, I mean, Danville has an amazing history and a lot of pride in that history. And, you know, just a small loop like this could go a long way, I think, in celebrating that and starting to connect your assets. So it's kind of like that small project that builds that interest and connectivity that could then grow into that, you know. So it's just, you have to start somewhere. And this seems like a really exciting place to start.
We spoke to KSD about that trail up Town Branch, and they have some security concerns, but I think it's nothing that we couldn't overcome.
Yeah, so we might be on the east side of the branch.
Some security fencing, nothing
Right.
overwhelming that would take away from the experience, but something to make them feel secure.
Yeah. Other comments or questions?
Can you go back to the three concepts?
Sure. You'd like to see them side by side like that?
Yes. I like the greenway concept, but maybe with some of the climbing structures.
And that's what always happens. You end up hybridizing. And I think that is actually better than saying, oh, I just like this one.
Right.
Because then you leave off all the good things in the other two, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, Josh and Earl were starting to do the same thing. Oh, this about that one, that about that one.
Well, the neat thing, when you had your public meetings, you have that family, that 5 or 6 kids from the same family came over.
Right.
And they were all over the board about
They were.
what was good for this. So it's about getting a variety of people, a lot of different ages.
It is.
Really neat that they did.
It is, and this kind of feedback, you
Yeah.
know, can also be online, could be on a online survey or something, fill that in. So we've talked about maybe posting some of this on the website too, as a way to get some feedback.
Or if we did half of the butterfly, and then put the gardening.
Right, sure. Yeah, or the, you know, the parts of the wings could be productive too.
Right.
Absolutely. You could take that structure but make it productive. Well, and I think we all know that our pollinators are in trouble, right? And so there's a lot of funding actually available to do pollinator gardens and pollinator habitats. So the idea of looking at that as a potential landscape for the landfill is good. I mean, at least it would serve some purpose. Because otherwise it's kind of holding us, you know, we can't do anything with it, right?
And you may have noticed that all 3 of those concepts have the Public Works salt building going away. And, you know, we don't have a plan for that. You know, that's just, if this moves forward and it's the right thing to do to find another home for our salt building, then we'll figure that out.
Right. All right, well, we'll move on to Fairgrounds and Land District.
All right. So thinking about the fairgrounds, again, another one of those great assets that now is under the city's domain. As we started thinking about goals and objectives, you really have some amazing assets that are all kind of in close proximity. So we've got Boyle County High School, you've got the fairgrounds itself, you've got Millennium Park. And one of the things that we spoke about, Earl, was the church and that property and what that could potentially mean. When we start thinking about those assets, it really presents an opportunity to create a civic district. You know, we've got the Performing Arts Center, which we thought was incredible, you know, being within that conglomeration of uses. So when we start thinking about the fairgrounds, those same themes resonate. It's connectivity, both from a vehicular standpoint and from the pedestrian standpoint. What is that experience? What are those things that reach out and weave themselves together? So the concept, we've got a really strong entrance, that boulevard that goes into Millennium Park. Man, what a signature opportunity that we have. And what we see at the end of that, the entrance to Millennium Park, is an opportunity maybe to celebrate that entrance a little bit better, right? So when you drive into the park, you're faced immediately with a decision point. Do I go left or do I go right? And if you're not familiar with the park, you don't have much time to figure out which direction you want to go. I will say that I appreciate how valuable Millennium Park has been through the years. My parents have been the beneficiary of that, right? My dad said, don't screw it up. So we're going to not do that. But the opportunity is to maybe separate that decision point as you come in by tying off the roads a little bit deeper into the site and having some sort of wayfinding signage that says softball fields here, soccer, football in this direction. So it gives you more time to adjust, and it comes in and tees in so that you have to stop and make that decision. So it's not a drive-by. In like fashion, the connections off of the bypass and the fairgrounds are very quick and very, obviously in drop-off and pickup become an issue. So the same strategy. Can we move that decision point deeper into the site to give us more time to make those decisions, whether we're going to go left or go right? So what you see on the screen in yellow are the vehicular connections and recommendations that we're making. So one of the opportunities is to really connect Millennium Park into the fairgrounds, as opposed to going back out to the main road by the middle school and then getting access. So we connect into the existing network that drives or allows you to navigate through the center of the site. One of the things that we had to keep in mind is that this part of town really needs an EMS and fire station. And so the fairgrounds presents an opportunity for us to accommodate that. And that can be located right now. We're suggesting that it's over by the Humane Society. It has direct access to the bypass. We can reconfigure that road network so that it gives us that decision-making time. But now your fire and EMS station is not dependent on navigating through the park, through that intersection. God forbid it would be drop-off or pick-up. So it gives it a clean access into serve the rest of the city. As we started looking at master plan and some of those things, those assets that might be leaving us if Bunny Davis is transformed. Right now, the high school and Bunny Davis accommodate tennis courts. If those go away, we have an opportunity to consolidate those to give us 6 tennis courts, which actually allows us now to accommodate tournaments. So it can become a tournament facility that serves both entities. We have an opportunity to provide a high school age baseball field, which right now I believe is not available to us. So we have that opportunity to locate that in supplemental parking that's proximate to it. We've got an opportunity to accommodate a multi-use synthetic turf field, something that is not available to us right now in the community, which is located in this location. And then we've got 3 existing structures out there that we can either take down or look to repurpose. Well, the thought is, why not leverage those structures if they're in physical good condition? So the idea is that this covered structure that has a dirt floor is to convert that into a pavilion that can be leased out, rented out, with outdoor space and proximate parking. And the barn that's existing there, you could salvage the middle third of that, and it can become a structure that serves the multi-use field. Could be used in conjunction with that pavilion that we were talking about. And then we've got this building in the middle that I think you said is used for pitching.
It's used for multiple different things. It's rented out facility. The high school has rented it out for their indoor use to prepare for their baseball season. Marching band has rented it out from us. They They practice in there throughout the winter as well. Multiple things take place in that building.
The opportunity here is that if Bunny Davis goes offline, is that we need to find a new home for Parks and Rec. And I know that having this, their new offices close to Millennium Park, where a lot of their focus is right now, could be very, very efficient. So repurposing that structure, but also providing an opportunity for leasable or rentable space for outdoor activities, and having what we're calling home plate, but an outdoor terrace that overlooks both the baseball field, the tennis facility, we believe is something that is needed and is available to us. Now, one of the challenges that we have in this site is grade change, right? So we've got space, we believe, to allow those transitions to take place and actually create a very unique environment. And probably the most important thing that you see in red is that pedestrian connectivity to bring this district together. The high point, which is located here, is our ridgetop. And we envision that being the pedestrian spine that begins to reach out and capture both Millennium Park, the fairgrounds, and even back into the high school. Especially if we're going to be hosting tennis activities, we provide safe and convenient access as opposed to the kids having to get in a car, drive over. We now have a very definitive spine or network that begins to weave that together. It also gives us connections into the high school campus itself, and with opportunities to connect to a pavilion or an outdoor venue. That outdoor venue, we're envisioning overlooking the lake that's in place right now with a civic green that wraps and is backed up by the existing tree grove, which right now is underutilized in that plan. If you haven't been out there, that tree grove, in my mind, is a tremendous asset. So that is the backdrop to a civic green and an outdoor venue, really provides a unique experience for things that you might program either through the city. It could be used in festivals. Brass Band Festival, I'm sure, could probably use that venue if it's so inclined. I mean, it opens up and gives us more opportunity and a wider bandwidth of uses within the park, so that it's not just athletic and it's not just events. So that's a whole lot of words, right? And so I want to open this up. If I missed anything, or if there are specific questions, that is a lot of information to digest.
So do you see a clamshell at the apex of that?
In this location, yeah, it could be an outdoor stage pavilion, event center. But with that civic green, so we're thinking that, you know, a tree-lined space that helps define that physically, to contain that space, but then to give you this opening out to the lake. And then in orange, which is probably hard to see from there, but we've got these connection points across the site. And this maintenance barn, we had a harebrained idea, right? So that maintenance barn that I believe is high school property right now, what if that was renovated to become a space that supported the performing arts? What if this became an outdoor venue for dance recitals, that type of thing? Or maybe it could be rented out for things like wedding receptions. You know, could you utilize or repurpose that structure, obviously with the cooperation of the high school? That could be something that really ties in with the Performing Arts Center and expands their impact and imprint on the park itself.
So what's their intention for that barn right now?
They've not identified a purpose. We met with the school and provided them the information that he just shared with you all, and they love the idea, and they're considering they're looking at that barn differently than they did before, and so they'll have committed to thinking about if that can serve a broader purpose. The thing, for the same reasons we talked about at the Michael Smith, going beyond 2nd Street, bringing something that's community serviceable and accessible to the west, to the south side of that new access road. That creates an environment where the road is going through that environment rather than the environment being on one side of the road, right? Then the other thing is this performance stage. You can make that extremely simple, but the catch is there is you have two parking lots. You have the soccer parking lot, you have the softball parking lot, that really you could provide a significant event there for the community. And when we met with some of the folks at the county, Julie, for example, you know, that's a space that the CBB has been needing for a long time. And so it gives us a chance for the CBB to work and recruit something for that space. So it's the thing about this plan looks good on paper if you're spatially aware of what we're looking at, right? But when you're out there looking at it, you see that the tennis courts are at the highest elevation and already, you know, there's a significant area there that's at that elevation. The ridge that's outlined in red, you really do, I mean, that's a prolific view across the west and towards Millennium Park. The baseball field is down there where the horse rink is and the tractor supply, the tractor pool area is. It's all kind of right there at this plateau. And then your natural location for your brown building that's in the center kind of lays out to support everything there, right? And the multipurpose field, even when you drive through that existing road that's in yellow that needs to be improved, as he's indicating, but that multipurpose field is generally already kind of graded out. So this plan is very phasey. You can bring it in phases and steps, but it's really accommodating for the layout that they presented. That grove of trees, you know, we've been through there probably, you know, no telling how many hundreds of times, going back and forth. And then when you when you stand there and look at those grove of trees with the idea that what if this is an outdoor space, it changes the whole impression. We took the county out there, Jason, I think you would agree, looking at that, it's really kind of profound when you go out there and look at it. And certainly we would be willing to take you out there and walk you through those improvements, but that's a great plan for that side. It just
So one of
is.
the problems in the past has been people cutting through the park, trying to cut the corner, and cut through the park and exit out the boulevard. Does this mitigate that in any way?
Well, you actually have a road there now, first of all.
That's right.
So that mitigates 80% of the cut through. But the other side is you want to improve that road and you want to provide that access into Millennium Park. So Millennium Park, this gives you an opportunity to pull the city and county's footprint and our brands and our community out to the bypass, which is where your visitors come through. So as traffic comes through, as they come into Danville from the north, they're driving into a community with this massive park on the left that they can look at and see, right? Right now, they just see lights on the other side of the hill. This brings that over to the bypass and enables marketing naturally without spending time to do that. It's a good opportunity.
It may not be a problem anymore.
No. It shouldn't be. And so the way that is that cut through becomes a delineation between the fire station side, the MS side, the turf field side, and then the rest of the sides. Your baseball fields, your community center, your tennis courts, and your operations that are up there. You would be, having publicly accessible tennis courts like that. I don't know a lot of communities our size that really have space that is truly, you could make hosting a nice regional tennis tournament. That's rare.
You might tell them about the court layout, how it's set up.
Yeah, so as we were thinking about the layout of this facility, we're envisioning that it's going to be terraced because of the grades that we have out there. And so we're envisioning four lower tournament courts with championship courts that would be up on the plateau a little higher to give it some prominence, and utilizing this hillside so that you could bench seating in, so that it provides almost like a stadium feel, leveraging the existing topography that we have out there. More space around these two championship courts so you can set it up. One of the things that we may want to think about is flexibility, right? So thinking about pickleball, what does pickleball mean? If pickleball were to be incorporated into this, I really see that being incorporated into the 4 tournament courts, but I would leave the championship courts alone so that they feel special and unique. And those are some of those things that we continue to discuss.
Yeah, and when you go.
6
6 total. Yeah, and when you go out there, if you tour and drive through there with this in mind, you gotta remember that border that has separated the fairgrounds and Millennium Park forever goes away, and it blends and it looks like it's one facility, right? That's an important vision to carry.
That's what's really cool about that pedestrian spine that connects all 3 parks together. It becomes what joins the 3 parks together. And it's a wider sidewalk. It probably has decorative lights on it and places to sit. It becomes a place to be.
Given track meets and tennis tournaments, what's the plan for restrooms there?
So restrooms can be incorporated into this building, which would be centrally located. If we do entertain renting this out, we need to think about restrooms on some level. So to answer your question, we haven't gotten to that level of detail yet, but we've got those places where those can be incorporated in pretty easily.
Okay. I think it's important, certainly.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, track and tennis is a lot of nerves.
Absolutely.
And I'm pretty sure you've got lighting in your thinking for the tennis courts.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Over the years, there's been some discussion about putting the pool and aquatic center over on the Millennium Park side, rather than leaving it where it is on the Bunny Davis side. So I was just wondering what the thinking was on the part of the city of leaving the entire aquatic center over on the other side of the highway, rather than some other entity in the park or recreation realm.
So I was gonna talk about that. Thank you, Wilma. As a parent, and especially a single parent, logistically, if you have multiple kids doing multiple activities, it's just not a good setup to have it completely separate like that. I know it's probably cost effective at the moment, but you can't drop your kid off at the aquatics facility and go with another kid to another activity and have your kid walk over. Or if you have an older kid in an activity, you know, you gotta do something with your smaller kid to maybe you can walk over to the playground. Or, you know, maybe mom can walk on the trail or something. So I don't think the setup as displayed today with the separation, it's just not really all encompassing for everyone. I mean, it's just not. And I think if also, we have different clientele that go to Bunny Davis and the Wellness Center, and I think you're gonna lose those Bunny Davis clientele by moving it over to the Wellness Center. It's just a different clientele. So, you know, as a parent and a single parent for many years, logistically, this doesn't help them. Sorry.
It seems to me that the dead silence on this indicates that something. So I would like to know, I mean, really, I'd like to know what the thinking has been, because I know you've discussed it. So.
You know, from my perspective, the light bulb really went off for me when I thought about the space that aquatic facility would take at the fairgrounds. When we talked about parking earlier, we would lose half of this, the possibility of doing half of this project that we're looking at now. Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. But there's indoor fitness partnerships with that. I mean, and we've talked about the struggle with the clientele that uses Bunny. I'm not gonna speak for it, but I'm gonna give my perspective on it. You know, we need to do something with that fitness facility, right? Like it needs improvements done to it, but just the size of it, you can't improve, you can't renovate that fitness space. And I don't know, and then how to, you know, the amount of clientele we have there, you couldn't really build a new facility for them.
You have about 100 people.
That makes financial sense. Like you need, if we're gonna build a new fitness center, we need to plan on having, I'm not sure I'm not gonna throw a number out, but there's a quantity of customers that we would need to know we're gonna have to make that math work. So I don't know.
You know, the Bunny Davis Center, you've got about 100 members, that's all. And then the Wellness Center for scale's probably got 3,000 members. And so you're talking about investing in a facility, it just doesn't make any sense, truthfully. And you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that. But then at the same time, you look at the.
We have to be all encompassing.
Well, and that's a good point. So what you want to do is create opportunities for walkability on both sides of the bypass. And so if you put all of your features on the opposite side of the bypass that are publicly accessible, you eliminate that entire properties that live on that side, the apartments, the resident, single-family residential, where are they going to walk to? They got to cross the bypass. Well, put something over there for them, put something over here for the additional people, spread out your resources, and that's what the master plan said in 2017. This is what, you know, they identified as a benefit too. And so this then takes those facilities and locates them. In the same way you had talked about with me one time before, where what if a single mother wants to go to the gym? And so then in the summertime, this provides an opportunity for them to drop their children off at the pool and then continue to do indoor exercise and fitness while their child's at the pool, right? And that's a different approach.
It eliminates the, you know, what if they don't want to do an indoor activity? What if they just want to walk on the trail?
Well, and they're walking trails at the wellness center, right? Like it's part of it.
You know, if you're dropping a kid off, I'm just telling you all the way it works in reality. If you're dropping a kid off to swim, and you got a tennis tournament, it's hidden in, you know, it's hidden in the car, dropping the kid off over here, back in the car, going across the bypass at an already dangerous intersection, and going through there. I mean, it's logistically, especially for single parents.
I've been right there.
It's a nightmare.
Listen, I've been right there as a single parent. I know, I understand what you mean.
And I just feel like we're limiting those people even more.
One thing that I would like to touch base on is, you know, you said it best right there, is we're limiting those people. If we end up putting an aquatic center over in the fairgrounds area, we're not gonna be able to get half of the things that you're seeing up there. And I think those are pretty important aspects to our master plan as well, in order for us to provide things for the people in our community that is needed. You know, that multi-purpose turf field alone can serve seveler different sports.
Soccer, football.
You know, you have soccer. What if lacrosse blows up in our area? I know that in a lot of larger cities, that's a very, very popular sport. That's something that we can hold camps on. You got ultimate frisbee tournaments, football, soccer, the whole 9 yards. And with it being a multi-purpose sports field, you're able to line that for multiple games. You know, you can have 2 crossway soccer fields along with a north and south soccer field as well, along with football field. Those features we would not get if we basically had that aquatic center in that area. So I feel like we're able to get more bang for our buck, more venues per se, just by having that over there. But I completely understand it does cause a separation, and that can be a hassle. I think in a perfect world, we would have everything all combined into one.
Look at it like this too. Instead of investing money in a parking lot, you're investing money in an athletic field. or multipurpose field. And that's one of that makes it significantly more affordable, not just a little bit, right?
Well, I appreciate all that, and I think this is great, but I don't know that it's very user friendly for the typical family that has multiple kids doing multiple activities.
Let me ask you a question to your point. Is a shuttle service solve anything?
No. Ideally, you would be able to have, you know, if you've got 3 kids and they're doing 3 different things, ideally, they'd be able to walk over when they're finished. Or, you know, you'd be able to,
It depends on ages too. A lot of places, they don't let you just leave your kids. You have to stay there with them. Like right now, my kids are in basketball and cheerleading, so I'm dropping off one kid here, and then I'm going over to Tolliver to do basketball. So you're never gonna get that perfect mix.
well, but if you have older kids, you know, and the younger ones are, you know, your older kids you drop off at practice or whatever.
I'm talking 8 to 10-year-old right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
I covered the pool thing as well, but a little bit differently. I've always just absolutely cringed every time I think about that pool being on the opposite side of the bypass, and not a soul can ride their bike when they're old enough to go over there. And I come from family swimmers, and I've coached swimming in a variety of places. And when you talk about an aquatic facility, and I'm not here really, I came for the arts components of all these things, but an aquatic facility, to me, serves a lot of aquatic purposes, not just, you know, therapy. You know, the McDowell pool, currently, that is a therapy pool. I'm telling you, you can't swim there necessarily for fitness. You can go and do classes, but that thing is heated to the point where, for a lap swimmer like myself, I'm nauseated at the end of swimming time, you know, and you only have 2. It's an aquatic facility has to be something that has like 2 pools, has indoor, outdoor. It has to have, I mean, you can't, in my opinion, I look at places that are, have done this, and you can't just say one pool serves all purposes, because it just can't. You can't have a competitive pool. You can't have a pool for competitive purposes that is also being used for, you know, has the ladder, you know, the chair that lifts up and down, and, you know, all that. You can't do those things all in one place. So what is the purpose of what our aquatic facility going to be? If it's summer fun, then that's a totally different thing. If it is therapy, well, okay, not therapy. If it's something, I mean, we can't, I don't understand what we're saying about aquatic facility. What purpose is it actually going to serve? Because it can't be all of what you're talking about now can't be all of those things. You know?
Well, the Bunny Davis is really now is serving most of those things. It's recreational swimming, it's a competitive pool. And so what you're trying to do is take the elements that you're describing and reusing those or reprogramming those into that space, so that the pool that's proposed or the idea, the concept of the pool that's proposed at the Wellness Center as an outdoor space, it has zero depth entry. So the need for the chair is reduced. You have the play area to the left of that picture. You have the lap lane in the middle that when the appropriate time for competition happens, you can isolate the use of that. Right now, we don't have an outdoor pool that's publicly accessible other than the Bunny Davis Center. So that replaces that. And then the indoor component of it, and I'll shut up, the indoor component of it is, it gives by creating a shared resource, it gives the McDowell Wellness Center PT facility maybe they can look at things differently then, because you're not asking for them to also maintain the pool with just exercise classes, right? So if you're programming the facility well and you're getting more and more customers into the facility for recreation, then maybe that pool can take a little bit different shape than just combination PT pool, combination this and that, who knows? So those are to be determined, but your point's understood and your point's well made. It's a complicated question, and it bears significant thought and consideration to how you solve that. But I do think it's solvable.
On the outside of bypass.
Correct, because you have a significant population on that side of the bypass that needs somewhere to walk to. Like you can't say that the people on this side of the bypass don't have to cross the bypass, and the people on that side of the bypass do have to cross the
So we're
bypass.
just making choices to which group of people with, you know.
Yeah, and so you're trying to diversify your resources so that you put some on that side of the bypass, some on this side of the bypass, some on this side of town, some on the south side of town. You're trying to make your park system all inclusive, not just one big massive park, which is what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to spread that out.
And I get that, but I just share all that.
Listen, I'm a single parent too. I appreciate that a lot. I've had to, you can't, there is no one that can say they've had to struggle with their kids more than me when it comes to spread. I've had 3 kids, 3 different age brackets. I've had 2 kids on 2 different softball facilities in 2 different towns at the same time as a single parent. I get it. That is not lost on me, I promise. But
No, but I also find it funny that there are 3 women saying that this is a logistical nightmare and the rest of the men are not.
I'm a man. Listen, I appreciate the fact that you struggle. I've struggled too. I've been right there with you. I mean, I have. I know, I understand what it's like to have the skateboard park accessible to the baseball field. I get that.
I'm really, honestly, more, all those things are true. And the whole, you know, what the facility is going to be used for. I get all of that because I've, you know, they're everywhere. But that fact that a very large percentage of our population that is underserved, period, is on the other side of the bypass from that pool. The population that I.
Which is on this side
of the city. So people who perhaps, in all honesty, quite bluntly, who have more opportunities to hop in a car and do that juggle of mom here, dad there, do live in that neighborhood over there. I mean, I'm not being judgmental entirely, but I am. The population of just looking at the neighborhoods that are on the other side of the bypass have no real chance sometimes of their kid hopping on a bike and biking to the pool. I wouldn't let my kids hop on a bike and bike to the pool.
You've got to keep in mind now, you've got a large density of multifamily homes on the west side of the bypass.
I get that, but not as dense, I mean, unless I live in another community, I don't think that the density of the population on the east side of this inside of the bypass is any less dense than the population on that side of the bypass.
No, but you have to acknowledge that you have people on this end that you're trying to serve from this direction. So you don't want people from this side of town having to walk all the way to that side of town to have some sort of service that we're providing them. So that's why you are looking at some sort of water feature at Michael Smith, some sort of water feature at the water plant. You can't ask kids to just go that far on their own. And so we have to diversify where we have features. That's not to say that your skateboard park, right now we have 1 skateboard park. I would suggest that there are kids on this side of town that can't get there.
I get that too.
Right?
I mean, it is
And
all
so
over.
regardless of whether or not they're crossing the bypass. And so what you're trying to do, it is impossible to have a one size fit all, right? That is just logistically not gonna happen. So what you're trying to do is achieve a solution.
Would it be possible for the stadium to consider, or whoever, a pedestrian bridge over the bypass?
And that's what I was gonna ask. And also, I think the general public, when an aquatic center is mentioned, the majority of the general public expects it to be in or near the limit. Or fairgrounds.
The bigger thing, I think and Jason kind of talked about this earlier, and I think we're talking about it now, like, I'm gonna say this, and y'all shout me down if I'm wrong, especially you, Evan. How many kids bike to Millennium Park now to do things, or walk? From like.
Across the bypass?
Just in general.
I mean, I rarely ever see kids riding up Cunningham Way by
Most
themselves.
of your ones come from Lenox area, that's.
Okay.
I mean, you have a neighborhood.
And I think that's a
Kids from
problem
Lenox that
for
utilize
us
that.
we have to solve that problem anyway. Like, that's a problem. We need to figure out how to get, Millennium Park's not really accessible now. You know, to even people on this side of the bypass. Just from a distance and perspective standpoint, I think there's like.
It's built for cars, for those
It's built for
people.
cars.
It
Let's-
really
and
is.
that's something we have to kind of acknowledge and think
Right.
about, like, how do we make that better? We've got to, and that's, I think that kind of leans into some of the stuff we've talked about. What do we do to make that trip across the viaduct more welcoming? I don't know. Is it another, do we look at other pedestrian crossings of the railroad tracks? This is a lot bigger conversation, I think, than even, I think there's the one perspective of, do we do the pool next to, what do we partner the pool with, right? I
Yeah.
think that's what you're saying, and then also how do we put it somewhere where people can get to it? That's the other conversation. I think those two things are something that, they are things we need to consider. It's tough.
It's very disconnected.
Yeah, no, and there's credibility to that for sure, and I'm trying to just throw the idea out there and try to debate it, right?
Yeah.
To try to punch holes in it each direction, and, you know, that's part of what the conversation has to do in order to try to get to the best solution. So, yes, I'm gonna debate it with you, but what we're trying to do is make sure we cover the bases as best we can at the end of the day. Right.
As pointed out before, as a partner, the county's partner in Parks and Rec as well, you know, although the city has taken it over. One of the things that I know a lot of us on the county cringed at is the cost to start fresh and build an aquatic center with all the things that this community needs, an indoor facility, outdoor facility, and whatever else that's going to encompass. I mean, if you kind of take a look at this building, would the city have bought the land and built a building to build a community center, if, you know, before, but you kind of look at, like what Earl said, you have your resources, you're partnering up with things because, you know, you're talking multiple millions of dollars just to build an aquatic center, besides just taking off the good real estate. I don't know if you guys have gone out on the tour is pretty good. But if you can partner up with, I as well said, you know, it's kind of hard it being all the way over there on that part of town, but when you can partner up with an existing structure and build it, you know, and add on to it, that's gonna be a fraction of what it would be to start fresh over at Millennium, and try to accommodate lots of things, and then you lose a lot of ability to put stuff over at Millennium. I mean, you're looking at 4 different things over here. You can't put everything in one place. It's gonna disservice somebody. And that's why I had said I hope that there's lots of splash pads and water features for the 2.5 months that they'll be used, you know, 3 months that they'll be used or whatever, but they're still vital. But I just looking from a finance aspect, you know, Anderson Dean's shut down right now. Who knows if it'll actually go back online because it's been shut down for so long. And I mean, Bunny Davis is a perfect example. If you shut down a pool, or no, KSD's a perfect example. If you shut down a pool, that water is going to cause havoc on that system. But I mean, I see both sides. Again, I was a single parent for 8 years, and I get it. But I hate the aspect of it being all the way over where it might go. But you got to use the resources that you have, because I don't know where else you would put an aquatic center on this part of town. Like, where would you build a pool? You'd have to buy the land. You'd have to, you know, then start the construction of it. You know, and that's, you only have so much resources, so much money, you know, at the city level.
Sometimes I think it seems the city and the various organizations have no problem finding land, buying it.
Ask the fairgrounds. They're having a hard time finding stuff to put something that.
I just feel that sometimes the concept, the right thing to do is not necessarily do it because it's cheaper.
Has nothing to do with cheaper, has to do with.
Well, no, I'm using your resources. Sometimes your resources do have to be used maybe for a thing that is not necessarily the least, I don't know, putting it over there, to me, using your resources over there is not a better thing than having it more available to more of our population that does not ever get to use a facility like that. Because it's just a place that's not accessible. We want to have accessible t-ball fields, we want to have accessible of everything. So why is the pool the least accessible thing we'll have, it seems like?
Your land is gonna be the most valuable thing, and over in this area, I think it's been talked about earlier, was, you know, an aquatic center would be great in the towns, but affordable housing over in this area would be much more beneficial. And so you don't wanna take up valuable resource of land over in this area for, you know, an aquatic center when you could actually hopefully build more affordable housing or something along those lines. I see it both
I'm
ways.
not talking about building an aquatic center anywhere else except for either at Fairgrounds or Millennium. I mean, that's what I'm talking about.
You're talking
Going
500.
somewhere else.
500 feet of that.
I'm just saying, it seems very disconnected. It's, unless we can find a way to build a pedestrian bridge across the bypass, I just don't think it's gonna be very well received. And the clientele is different, and there's clientele that do not wanna go to the wellness center. They just don't. It's like going to the Y, you know, they're going, supporting, Parks and Rec, like they would support a Y. And it just feels really disconnected. Or whatever that's worth.
Got a panel of 4 professionals up here. Commissioner Caudell and now Commissioner Terry has asked the question, what's the accessibility of grant money and the probability of doing over road bypass, pedestrian walkways? Seen in other cities.
To be honest with you, I'd have to research that to understand what grant opportunities are there, right? But we do know that funds are available, but we don't know, I couldn't speak to that
It'd
directly.
be nice to know, just like when we asked to evaluate Bunny Davis and whether it was worth keeping her on financially. Because there's another side too. It'd be nice if we could connect Jackson Park to Millennium. They almost touch each other, but we have that road and that railroad track.
And shoring up the neighborhood parks and the connectivity, that does help that. But if we're gonna have a public facility, an aquatic facility, a pool, public pool, whatever, it just still is not very accessible to a large population.
I want to go back to something Rick said, what interested me is something to connect Rosemont to the park, something over the railroad.
I've thought about that for 15 years, actually. I'd love to, you know, we'll dig into that a little bit further. It's always seemed so intimidating, the idea of building that pedestrian bridge over but that's a good, I mean, that's the ideal spot. And honestly, the bypass, I've stood there and looked at that storm drain that goes under the bypass there near behind Woodlawn, and thought, well, if I could just make this bigger, you could walk through it. So I mean, there's thoughts there that I've had before about, yeah, how do we open these things up? And you know, nobody wants to. I love connecting things that people can walk to and bike to. That's like, you know, but there's a hurdle there. You could put the facility, you could put the infrastructure in, but people still have to feel comfortable using it. It has to be has to seem safe. You know, whether it's safe or not, it has to go super safe. You know, it may sound bad, but it's about what people feel, right? It's about how comfortable are you doing these things. And I think there's a lot of barriers with Millennium Park getting people to, like, I'll run out to Millennium Park, I'll run out to Side Up and do that every day, but especially with kids, like how do we make a parent comfortable saying, okay, go take that bike ride? And I think that's a huge conversation that I want to have. And that's gonna come up with anywhere. If you have one, we've talked about earlier, you're only gonna have one of these pools in the city, right? Like that's, besides city water, you're gonna have one. Okay, and I would like it to be accessible by foot or by bike, distance wise, it's gotta be bicycle, right? Like, we have the size of our town is suited for, it's a 15-minute bike ride, theoretically, from the outside of town to the middle of town. So you could think, okay, I could take a 15-minute bike ride to the pool. But
Can I suggest a couple of things to move this discussion on down the road? I thought when the discussion came up about Ephraim, it was gonna be about accessibility to the new facility and the old facility for all citizens. I think that's one issue. Second thing I'd like to bring to the board is that, how about we ask these experts to do us a plan up from Millennium Park or from the fairgrounds, whichever was your pleasure, that includes an indoor-outdoor water facility, and see what that looks like, what we lose and what we gain from that. It's a possibility.
I'd like to see that too.
Now, we can sit here and talk about, if Millennium Park, if the hospital was not a barrier, where it's currently located, and it was free and open to everybody, those who want to swim in the summertime and wintertime are gonna get there. Now, I'm saying that because I live on the wrong side of the tracks on the lake, so, but let's see if we can get that out of the conversation on what we lose, what we gain from having a different location. No, I said, wait.
Let me down.
Go to 752 West Pine Street in Lexington, Kentucky, all right?
I'm talking about that.
But we're talking about kids, and unfortunately, our kids today, excuse me, I'm an educator. Our kids today don't walk in the place.
No, that's
Let's
right.
be honest about it, come on.
Yeah.
They
And
don't walk in the place.
I appreciate the partnership. I've been in aquatics my entire life. And I know even back in the 90s, it was $20,000 to $30,000 for us. I worked in Richmond at Telford, okay, and also at Eastern. It was $20,000 to $30,000 just for electricity and heating. You have to have a partner. We don't have 240 to 360. Now, that was a bigger pool. You have no idea how much these indoor pools cost to upkeep. You gotta have a partner. So that's all. I was shocked at the cost. So having in and out does have a benefit right next to each other, and having a partner that's covering that huge overhead, and it's not going to the taxpayer. So if you looked at it outside, just maybe outside it, at Millennium, I don't think it would ever be cost effective to do in and out over Millennium, ever.
I would also be interested in how big the Money Davis property is and what would happen what it would look like if we leveled it and how we could utilize that space. We could almost make that like a neighborhood park. And
So there's a book that Josh and I are both reading, talking about, and it's a good time to bring that up. When you're doing a project, you gotta think about, and I don't know how this applies, and they're trying to apply it as infrastructure. And they're trying to look at things that we spend our money on, is there actual payback to that? And I do think that there's something to consider a benefit cost ratio when you're looking at taking a property that might be worth $1 million in the market, in the private sector, and it's a hard equation. For example, the Bunny Davis Center, if you've just got if you have 100 customers there, you're looking at $25 a month, and that's $30,000 a year. Our operating expenses on that is multiple staff, multiple expenses tied to heating, air. That's a significant investment to serve 100 people. And so can you make a different investment level and improve service to everybody? you know, and ultimately, so there's a lot of that you have some level of responsibility to consider, I should say it like that.
But if you improve your facilities, you're gonna grow your membership.
Yeah, and so what his point is, and Evan, you can talk about that for a second, so it's not just me talking.
Well, one thing, let's see, Earl asked me a minute ago over there when I grabbed a donut how old I am, and I'll be 35 this Friday. Bunny Davis has been the same since I was 13 years old. It has not changed. There's nothing different. There's been no money invested in it. It's the same people that work out there since I was 13 years old. We do have regular clientele that come on a daily basis. We all know them by first name. We all get along. We're all friends. We're all acquaintances, but it has not changed. And in order to make Bunny Davis a competitive workout facility for people to get the things that they need and want, there's just no room. It's a 3-story building. Ideally, you can't put a workout facility in a 3-story building. You know, the space that we do have, you know, our regulars use our racquetball court very often. Every morning, we have 4 to 5 people that play racquetball. It's the same 4 to 5 people every day. We very rarely get new individuals to come in and play racquetball. Same thing for working out. We do have our Pilates classes, you know, our step classes. Those are the same people every time. We very rarely get new customers to come in and sign up for those classes. You know, with today's, I guess, technology and new ways in workout facilities, it requires multiple of the same equipment to house a class. Denise, I think you mentioned bicycling, to have that. We don't have the facility for that. Awesome idea, great idea, but you know, there's nowhere to put it. Bunny Davis is not ADA accessible. You know, when people come to sign up their kids, we do have people that are paraplegic in our community, and before our online registration, I would meet them in the parking lot to hand them paperwork so they could fill it out in the car or for a field rental. And you know, that's one thing with our civic rec program that we've been able to adapt and overcome and help individuals out like that. But as far as the workout facility goes, it's just not really feasible. I mean, it just doesn't work. You know, you want those things all on one level. You know, that's ideally what you want. We've looked at getting Stairmasters or the Stair Stepper because that's what people want to do. They want to climb steps when they work out. It's an intensive workout. We can't fit that machine in our basement without people hitting their head while they're climbing the steps on that piece of equipment. It just doesn't work.
And I'm not saying, you know, spend more money on Bunny Davis as it is. I'm saying, if we're gonna build a facility, an aquatic facility, then that's where your workout stuff goes. And I just think it needs to go in fairgrounds in Millennium Park.
I completely understand where you're coming from, because I think that would be an awesome addition to our community. But I think if that aquatics facility gets put in the fairgrounds, then we lose out on the opportunity of having such a wider range of facilities that could be put in the fairgrounds. You know, I think Josh had mentioned parking lot space alone would be unreal.
Yeah. So I think what we're hearing, we'll talk to John and his crew, and we'll talk about feasibility study, just, you know, from a cost, and, you know, we'll look at it all perspectives, think about some different options, and we'll come back and talk to you all later with some more. That help?
Yeah. And not to discount what you all presented at all, not at all. I like it. There's just a disconnect there.
I think that from our perspective, we need to give you something to react to. And so our opportunity here is to think outside of the box, look for connections, vet it with this group. But this document is not final. It's going to be a living document that's going to continue to evolve as we get more information and more input. And so I think it's been a lively conversation. I think it's an important conversation to have because whatever happens, wherever it goes, it's a significant investment. It's an investment in our resources on many levels. It's an investment in the community, your neighbors, et cetera. And so we want to make sure that we've vetted everything to the best of our ability so we find the best solution possible, recognizing that it's not going to fill every box. It's not going to check them all, right? Because we just have some physical challenges. You know, you've got the bypass, you've got the railroad, you've got the viaduct. We've got a lot of things that we need to think about, and that's why connectivity and not just thinking of these things in little small sites is so critically important, which is why we're taking that look broader and then trying to build a network closer and closer to home that has logic behind it, that is steeped in vetting this and getting and hearing the voices of the folks who are going to use it every day. And if we're not doing that, we're doing an incredible disservice to everybody in this room and everybody outside the building. So I think it was great. So for that, I appreciate the candid conversation. Otherwise, we're in a vacuum. Does it make sense? All right. Anything? This is, the last slide has been presented, so is there anything else that is left unchecked?
Good conversation.
Yeah, I'm kind of come out of that excited because we've talked about trails a lot since I've been back, and I think we recreationally trails or something. But I think today I really got I see the priority of trails for not just trails but just pedestrian and bicycle connectivity throughout town, and I'm ready to go. Let's do it because it's not just about building a sidewalk or building a trail. It's about creating paths for people. It's about wayfinding. It's a lot. So I think that's something we can work on. We put a little thought into it, but I hear the priority today. So we'll get busy on that.
And there are, it does trend with younger generations of not owning cars and walking or biking everywhere. That is a trend with younger generations.
And some old.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so we need to, if you all want to break for lunch, be back at 1 o'clock, is that what you've got scheduled?
Yeah, I mean, we no earlier than 1 o'clock, but if you all want to, how long do you all need for lunch? 12:16.
Can we work through lunch?
Well, our next consultant's not coming in until they're prepared to be here at 1 o'clock. So we can just plan on being back at 1 if that works for you all.
I don't know.